Are you happier now that you made the transition?
I would say every day in my tech role has been 100 times better than the best day at school.
Wow.
Really. I mean, it
Wow.
is like when they say it is life changing. And I'm not trying to brag about the salary that I have or anything. They've been very transparent with you on what a lot of starting salaries for this role is. But the second that I signed my contract, I doubled my salary. So if I know there's a couple teachers that are watching, just double it and imagine making that. But working from home, having better work-life balance. I went on a cruise in November. I mean, it was like I feel so much more myself now. And I don't know how to describe that unless you're also been in education and understand. Yeah. So my name is Curtis Barber. I was in cohort number 3, which was barely, one of the first. We were the pioneers for PreSales Academy. But yeah, I work at a company called Sochi. I'm an associate solutions engineer, and I started working there in July. So a couple months after I graduated in May. Sochi is a marketing tech SaaS company. They offer an all-inclusive marketing technology platform for multi-location businesses. So examples would be like Ace Hardware, Marco's Pizza, different kinds of things. So we sell to different types of customers, but a lot of what Nina and Yuji has said has been very true about what the role is actually like. I guess I should start with what kind of led me to PreSales Academy. I titled this part, Yuji, sometimes a podcast can change your life. So I was a teacher. I was in my teaching role, and I realized that I was somewhat burnt out. I don't know if maybe some people on the webinar today can kind of understand that. And I started searching for what could ultimately utilize the skills that I honed as a teacher in another career. And so I listened to a podcast. It's not the Pre-Sales Collective podcast, but it was actually one that talked about solutions consulting. And the guy on it, who is a director of solutions consulting, he mentioned that his wife had just undergone a boot camp to transition into pre-sales. And so I messaged him on Facebook, and I tried to get some more information from him. And he mentioned that she'd just gone through the first cohort of this thing called PreSales Academy. And he gave me her number, and I called her that night. And she really, she was also a former teacher. She had just finished her cohort and had landed a job. And so she really encouraged me to go ahead and apply to PreSales Academy and really pave that way. And so from there, I did an applications process that's very similar to what it is today. Got to meet Maddie and Yuji from an intro from her, and got into the April cohort of this past year. Now, when I was job training and job searching, it was a little bit like making an omelet. So, here I was, an egg, and first I needed a recipe of how to do this, right? To get out of where I was and ultimately into this job that I could visualize and imagine myself, but didn't have the skills yet. So the first thing I needed was training. And so PreSales Academy was the first start. That was the recipe. I needed to crack the egg. I needed to learn new things and accept that breaking into tech is exactly what it sounds like. You have to break yourself to get into this process. It's not saying that it's impossible. It's just saying that it's going to take a lot out of you. It's a transition of your whole career. Then I had to add in a bunch of strange ingredients, right? Most omelets have weird stuff in it. And so that was classes on APIs. It was value selling. It was how to deliver a demo and coaching. Lastly, I had to add heat to it, right? That was the moment in which I graduated from PreSales Academy and started getting into the job field, because half of your job search is training for it. The other half is actually going and applying and understanding that there's a pipeline to interviewing, and it's not going to happen in a week. Sometimes it does, but that heat is what ultimately cooks the whole omelet. Understanding how to become active on LinkedIn, learning how to sell yourself, right? We're in a sales role. Pre-sales is sales first. I think that's what people sometimes get intimidated by. They think you have to be the engineer part. It's like, no, you need to be a good seller. And so learning how to sell yourself and understand I have applicable skills. I've identified them from this training, and I then know how to articulate that ultimately to people in an interview process. Lastly, the last part of making an omelet is knowing when to stir and when to flip, right? So knowing when the job was a right fit, having coaching from mentors and advisors and program advisors, staying positive, and then ultimately knowing that there is a timing component to it. I thought I was going to get a job before I was done with PreSales Academy, and Yuji told me to stop that. So, I waited till I was done, and ultimately, but by 6 weeks out of the program, I had 2 offers in my inbox on July 5th. So, and I got to choose between. The last part I want to talk about today is any advice that I might have for people who are looking to get into this. I think the most important thing to remember is that you need to be somebody's unicorn. And by that, I mean that you have to know what you bring to the table for any job transition that makes you different than everybody else around, whether it be your other cohort mates who might be interviewing for the same thing or other people in the space that are trying to break in. What do you bring to the table that's unique? What my path, what worked for me is not necessarily going to work for everybody, but knowing what makes you different and how you can deliver that to people ultimately puts you apart and sets you apart and makes you a unicorn.
Like, how's your experience been so far in the role at this point? And are there any surprises that you were, coming out of, or when transitioning from the program into your role that you experienced as far as like what you've experienced in the role?
I think there were certain things that were exactly like what PreSales Academy told me it was going to be like. One, discussions with how to make a good partnership with AEs. I didn't realize that until I was fully onboarded and ramped in my role. And then I was like, oh my gosh, everything we talked about in PSA is actually true. Also, just especially if you never worked remote, you have to understand that working from remote is a separate thing than going into an office every day. And so the work and the commitment and the consistency that we had to do in PreSales Academy definitely applied. But I think in every aspect, especially in the demo delivery and the coaching, it meant a lot for me to have a coach who is a working SE in the field say, that was a really good demo. If you were on my team, you would be on the right track. That meant a lot to me because I'd never worked a day in the life.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. There's a couple of good questions too that came in that I think would be great to get your perspective on. How did you deal with imposter syndrome when going through this transition?
It's a good question. I was going to say something funny like, well, I just knew that I was the best, but I do think that there is something about mindset, right? Growth mindset. You're not an expert. I'm not. I've been ramped. I've been completely ramped and trained in my role. And when I say that to people who don't understand what I mean is when I got hired, I started on July 18th. And for 10 weeks, I trained in my role, which was ironically mind tickle assignments, just like in PreSales Academy. And I had to do practice demos with a coach. I mean, it was like PreSales Academy 0.2, which was hilarious too. But once I was completely ramped, which has been since October 1st, it's been a whirlwind. And so, yeah. Good.
No, I love it. I love to hear it. And you're right. I think you very, very confident in your approach to most things, which has helped you get to where you are. So
yeah, I think just knowing that you're not the expert, right? You don't have to be the expert. And by understanding that, I understand what my point was, which I lost when I said it before, but which is that delivering value to somebody for them to understand the solution that you are potentially helping sell them doesn't mean that you show them everything. We talk about in PreSales Academy not to give a Harvard tour of your software. You're not going to show them every part. You're going to show them a strategic several parts that delivers value to them and says, yeah, okay, this software would make my life easier, would make it, deliver ROI to them. So that helped me feel not so much like an imposter because it made me feel like I only have to know the things that are relevant to this one deal at a time.